The Mets lost their first series in a month on Sunday. Can they bounce back from that and take advantage of their easy road ahead? I'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode of Locked On Mets is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Did you know that it's never too late to resolve your tax issues with the IRS? Don't wait. Reduce your tax debt and get help from a team of licensed tax professionals by calling 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. The New York Mets lost their first series since Jorge Lopez launched his glove into the stands over a month ago. It was a fantastic run that saw the Mets go 16-8 in the month of June and battle back to 500, although after losing this series to the Astros, they now dip one game below 500. But what I want to tell you is there's no shame in the series the Mets lost this week. And yes, it's frustrating because they had Saturday's game in hand and they nearly came back on Sunday. But the Astros are a good baseball team that has gone through a similar season as the Mets, but has a far greater track record. And just like the Mets, have turned it on lately. So this was not a team that you look at and say, man, a really bad team just stole a series from the Mets. No, it's a pretty good team. And I'm also here to put you all on the therapy couch because I have been getting subtext since this loss. I've seen messages on social media. I've talked to my own dad about the Mets, and there's already that doubt that's creeping into Mets fans' minds right now, and rightfully so. This team has been very bipolar this year. In some respects, they go on these amazing runs, as we've seen twice now, and we saw the 0-5 start and the really bad 35 games that was in the middle of their two hot stretches this year. But I believe this team is going to be fine. And if they had lost this game 4-0, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But I still saw enough in this game that made me optimistic about the road that is ahead. And we'll talk about that road in the next segment because it should be pretty easy. It should be a stretch that the Mets take advantage of if they really are a good team, put themselves squarely in the wild card mix, if not atop the wild card mix, or at least atop the scrum below the Braves, and enter the All-Star break with a real opportunity to view themselves as buyers with a couple weeks left to round out their roster and potentially go on a run this season. So everything is out in front of the Mets. But this was a series that they could have won. And so I understand the expression. I understand the frustration, okay? Because Saturday's game was in hand, and you thought Luis Severino on the mound versus bullpen game for the Astros, the Mets would have found a way to win that final game. Unfortunately, things just did not break their way. They were no hit until the sixth inning. Meanwhile, Severino, in some respects, had a great start because they needed length out of him, and he got through 7 innings on 79 pitches. With that said, he gave up a home run to John Singleton, and then he got blooped to death by the Astros in this game. He said after the game, it was as dominant as he has felt all year, and the pitch count reflects that. And yet, some of those hits, the fly ball or the pop-up that Lindor nearly caught that dropped in, the 1-2 count where Yainer Diaz hit one the other way and it just got jammed and was strong enough to muscle it to right field to score a run. Just those little plays that didn't go the Mets' way that allowed the Astros to get out to a 4-0 lead. Now, sixth inning, though, this team battled back. Again, they've been no hit up until that point. Brandon Nimmo leads off the inning with a base hit. JD Martinez strikes out. Pete Alonso hits a double to put 2 runners in scoring position. DJ Stewart strikes out. Then with 2 outs, Mark Vientos rips one down the left field line to score 2. That cuts the Mets deficit in half. Okay, then in the 7th inning, Brandon Nimmo ties the game with a 2-run homer, his 100th home run of his career, and all of a sudden, new ball game. Adrian Hauser comes in, He gives the Mets 2 scoreless innings of relief. And I felt like if there was not the rain delay, the Mets would have rode that momentum and walked it off in the bottom of the 9th inning. Because everything was coming up Mets in those final 2 innings, from Torrens gunning down a runner to get rid of the one base runner the Astros got in the top of the 9th. It just felt like all the momentum was riding in the Mets' favor. And then they had to pause the game for, 2 hours, 3 hours? A brutally long rain delay. You come out of it, the Mets don't score in the bottom of the 9th. The Astros score in the top of the 10th off Adam Ottavino. And yet the Mets nearly came right back because Brandon Nimmo, who had a great day, 3 hits, he doubles in the ghost runner. He's standing on second base as a pseudo second ghost runner. And you have a chance to just get that runner in and win. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And that's where the Mets lost the game. But you don't look at this team and all of a sudden begrudge their lineup. They scored 18 runs in this series. Okay, that's more than enough to win a 3-game set. It just didn't shake their way. JD Martinez had a bad game. He strikes out in that spot with Nimmo standing on second base. They don't even pitch to Pete. So now you have Harrison Bader coming up. Bader grounds out. Mark Vientos grounds out. And it goes into the 11th. Festa comes on, the new 4A pitcher that's up and down from the minor leagues for the Mets. And Matt Festa gives up 5 runs. And that's the ball game. But with all of that said, we were talking about this team a month ago, and at every point since then, when it was, are we believing this? The Mets just swept the Nationals, and I was in D.C. for that series. They're about to head right back there. And I'm doing these shows like, it's hard to have faith, but this team looks pretty good. They go into the London series. They lose the first game. Like, oh, man, what's this team going to be here, right? Then they're losing the second game, and again, you might lose some hope, lose some faith in what the Mets can do. They rally back and they win that game in dramatic fashion. All right. Bought back in a little bit more. Go up against the Marlins, lose the first game. Ah, man, are the Mets really that good? Then they reel off 7 straight, grimace Mets, all that good stuff. Incredible vibes. They lose a game to Texas to end that streak. Okay, it's fine. It's typical. They go up against the Cubs, win 1, lose 1, win the series. So, hey, keep winning series. Everything's all right. Then you bludgeon the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros in the first game of this series. And it felt like the Mets weren't going to lose again. Then they blow 1 on Saturday and they can't come back all the way on Sunday. But those 2 losses, that does not erase everything that happened the month before it. And I think if you compare the 12-3 stretch at the beginning of the year to this one, it's a far different run of success. I think what we're seeing now is more sustainable. That first run was some of the guys at the end of the lineup that were connecting and some really great and clearly unsustainable pitching, particularly out of your bullpen. This recent run, all offense. And an offense that looks sustainable. So now as the Mets enter what will determine their season, a stretch against a lot of bad teams, are the concerns about their pitching enough to outweigh what this lineup is capable of? That's what we're going to talk about next. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, PrizePicks is just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. So you can look at David Peterson's strikeouts coming up in the game tonight. You take more or less how much do you feel like he's going to set down the Nationals on strikes. And that is one part of your entry. Maybe like Francisco Lindor on his fantasy score. So everything Lindor does, from his hits, his home runs, runs, RBIs, they all contribute to his fantasy score. You take more there. And then maybe on the other side, you think that Mackenzie Gore is going to strike out a lot of Mets. You can also add that to your entry. You can even cross over different sports. So you can take a player in the MLB and also one in WNBA, all in the same entry. And you can get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of PrizePicks community today. If you want to play PrizePicks, download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Today's episode is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here with Locked On Mets, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season's over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and can even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also just see the link in the episode description below. If you want to stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. So let's talk about this road ahead for the New York Mets, because I have been mentioning this on this show for a long time. The Mets are about to play 14 games over the next 2 weeks until they get to the All-Star break. There's no days off. You got the Washington Nationals for 4. You then have the Pittsburgh Pirates for 4. You return home, you face the Nationals again for 3, and then you get a series against the Colorado Rockies for 3 more. And actually, out of the break, you have 4 games in Miami against the Marlins. So your next 18 games come against teams that are under 500. But particularly, let's look at the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the All-Star break, where the Mets front office will have time across 4 days to really sit back, look at their roster, look at the minor leagues, and figure out how they can really plot out the second half of this season to contend and make the playoffs. Anyone who wants to talk about this being a bridge year has not been paying attention to everything David Stearns has said and who the owner of the New York Mets is. If they have an excuse or any inclination that they can win at all this year, they're going to go for it. Now, going for it might just mean sitting on your hands and not doing anything with the deadline. But this team is not predisposed to sell. But they also could give the front office every reason to sell. And I think in a weird way, it's still a win-win situation. But personally, I enjoyed the last month of Mets baseball a heck of a lot more than the earlier parts of this season. And I don't want to endure an August and a September that doesn't matter. So I want to see the Mets win games because I'm a Mets fan. Now, looking at this road ahead, they should be able to handle business. The last time the Mets were in DC, what did they do? They won all 3 games, and particularly in convincing fashion, especially the last 2 of those games. All right, so now you got another chance against this Nationals team. The Pittsburgh Pirates are definitely playing better baseball, but if you're looking at the wild card race, the Nationals and the Pirates are the 2 teams that I look at that have been hanging in there that should theoretically fall back and be more sellers at the deadline than buyers because they still feel like they are a year away from really being able to contend. Now, we're going to see James Wood in this series, and he is the top prospect in all of baseball, according to us at justbaseball.com. I think MLB Pipeline has him 3rd. A very special player. He was the big piece they got in the Juan Soto trade. And so that's going to be fun and also not fun to watch him get his first at-bats. He is a special player. So maybe that does propel the Nationals in this series. But again, this is still, if you look at the rosters head-to-head, this is a series the Mets should win. And you can say the same thing about each of the next, whatever it is, 5 series that they play until they face the Yankees again later on this month at Yankee Stadium. And that's after they play in Miami. So, where are the question marks? Where are the holes? What's going to hold them back from doing what they should do? Over the next 2 weeks, the Mets need to win each of these 4 series. And if they did that, because 2 of them are 4-game sets, they would close out this stretch with a 10-4 record, and they would end up at 50-45 at the All-Star break, 5 games over 500. Now, if you remember when we were talking about this at every stage, whenever I would mention this light period in their schedule, I was just hoping the Mets would be 5 games under by the time they got to this point. But they did what they had to. They went on a real winning streak that propelled them out from the doldrums and got themselves right back into essentially the driver's seat. I mean, yes, there are teams ahead of them, the Braves, the Padres, and the Cardinals. But none of them have a schedule that's this light in July. So if the Mets go on another winning streak here at some point, if they can reel off 7 in a row during this stretch at any point, if they can just win 10 of 14, or even we'll say 9 of the 14 games, they go 9-5, they're 49 and 46, 4 games over. That's still in comfortable position, right? It's just a matter of beating these teams that theoretically you should. And I have no doubts about this lineup. Right field, second base are the two positions where you can maybe say, all right, well, what are the Mets going to roll with for these 2 weeks? But I look at this upcoming series, Jose Iglesias did pretty well hitting against left-handed pitching when the Nationals last faced the Mets. So you're going to see a lot of him at second. Right field, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment because I do have one big gripe from this past game. I'll get to that when we really get into our series preview here of Mets versus Nationals. Over this stretch, they had to figure out the starting rotation. They need to get more length from these guys. Severino did it in this past game, but Quintana continues to go light in his starts. He's not getting pulled from the rotation right now. Sean Manaea has continuously gone light in his starts. David Peterson as well has not gone deep in his starts. Now, Christian Scott and Jose Butto have been two of the better Mets starters this year at going deep into games, and both of them could be heading back into the rotation as soon as this week. So that could solve some of this. Kodai Senga might be starting a rehab assignment. That's not going to help the Mets during this stretch, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind as they still have to figure out their rotation and make some decisions. The questions all lie with the bullpen. Edwin Diaz has 5 more games till he comes back from his suspension. Brooks Raley, Drew Smith out for the year with Tommy John surgery. Sean Reed-Foley has hit the IL now a week ago now, or whatever it was, but he's on the IL for the second time this year with a bulky shoulder. You can make an argument that between Raley, Smith, Sean Reed-Foley, that those guys have been your best relievers this year, just on ERA at least. Nunez now has entered the fray, and Garrett has had some really good moments and then some bad ones. And then there's Edwin Diaz, who has had a bad year, but you know the stuff that he possesses. But the point is, this bullpen is in a bad place. Matt Festa and Tyler J joined the bullpen on Sunday. Festa got knocked around. He's probably on his way back to Syracuse. You still have Tyler J, who had a good one appearance, I believe, with the Mets this year, off the top of my head, 1 or 2. Hasn't had the best numbers in Syracuse since being sent back down, but he was the guy the Mets chose. Josh Walker, I thought was going to be the name they called on. He very well could get called up with Festa potentially being sent down. And then you have Ty Adcock, who just got added into the mix and had one good appearance so far. We'll see. It's a small sample size. Shintaro Fujinami and Bryce Montes de Aca are both in the minor leagues right now, trying to get their way back from injuries. So those guys have the potential to throw really hard and be difference makers, but you can't really count on it. During this next 2-week stretch, the roadmap is pretty simple. Bash your way to wins. That's it. This Mets team needs to score a lot of runs. And I do wonder if at some point they take advantage of their depth when it comes to their starting pitching and put some of these guys in the bullpen. Jose Butto has been a better pitcher, or is a better pitcher, than almost every guy they keep shuttling up and down. Could you get to a point where you have 2 guys in your bullpen, if it's Jose Butto and Adrian Hauser, that can fill that same role that Hauser's been filling lately? Guys that can give you 3 innings of relief and save the rest of the pen. And also potentially start to pitch some of those innings and leverage. Adrian Hauser today, in a tie game, gave you 2 zeros. Could that be Butto? Could that be David Peterson? Could that be Tyler McGill? Could that be Brandon Sproat, one of your top pitching prospects who's in Double-A, but would have better stuff than pretty much anyone in the Mets bullpen outside of Edwin Diaz? Seriously. Would the Mets consider just saying, you know what, this guy's great. He's pitching deep into games. He looks like a real starter for us down the line, but we have a chance to win this year. we're calling up Brandon Sproat, we're putting him in the bullpen. Did it in college. Now, I don't think they do that in July, but would they consider that in August? These are the different conversations that I'm sure are happening in that front office, trying to figure things out. And right now, they're going to keep piecing it together. And I'm sure they look at this light schedule as an opportunity to win games with their bats, to hopefully get more out of a rotation that isn't great, but maybe can pitch a little bit better against some weaker lineups, and just buy time until you get Diaz back, and hopefully things can fall into place. If there's one thing that could bite the Mets this season right now, as presently constructed, it's their bullpen. And by extension, their rotation that puts their bullpen in bad spots by not going deep into games. But particularly holding those late leads. It's been a problem all year. It was a problem at the end of this series. If they can figure that out, if they can get to some combination of 4 relievers that they really trust, I believe this team can go on a run. So that's what they have to figure out. And luckily, this is a good opportunity to maybe work around your problems and still find some victories and some serious wins until you get to the All-Star break, until the Mets really have to find whatever roster they're going to be down the stretch. Are they a seller? Are they a buyer? And if they're a buyer, how do they buy? How do they get this team in position to make a real run? It's going to be a fun month. July is here, and the Mets are in it, which is not something we would have expected a month ago. So with that said, Mets fans should still be happy this morning, despite how frustrating this weekend was. Now, I want to preview what lies ahead, particularly in this series against the Nationals. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want to stop. But as the playoffs have now winded down in the NBA and the NHL, there's just fewer games to go around, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But with FanDuel, I can stay locked into sports whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You get the lineup graphics sent to your phone each day. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so let's talk about this series against the Washington Nationals. Once again, the Mets are going to see a bunch of left-handed starters. So Jose Iglesias, it is your time to shine once again. I imagine he gets the next 3 starts at second base. Jeff McNeil could maybe steal a starter or 2 in right field, which leads me to my biggest gripe from Sunday. No, it's not the blue pits that fell against Luis Severino. No, it is not the fact that they had a runner on second base in the bottom of the 10th inning with nobody out and they couldn't get Brandon Nimmo home, although that was really frustrating. No, what pissed me off was in the 4th inning when Ben Gamel got pinch hit for, of all things. But it just drives me nuts when there's empirical data that tells you something and it's staring you in the face and the New York Mets just choose to ignore it. It drives me up the wall. I can't tell you how much it pisses me off when I know something off the top of my head because I've looked at the stat time and time again, and yet we just go back to this stupid preconceived notion that, oh, a righty is definitely going to hit better against a lefty. We have to play the splits. Well, actually, not even play the splits. We have to just play, left arm, righty batter. That's what we're going to do, no matter what. We're not going to look at anything else. Carlos Mendoza. And I shouldn't even just blame him because this is a problem that has plagued the Mets my entire time covering the team with Locked On Mets. It's going on 6 seasons now where things like this consistently pop up and I don't understand it. The math doesn't math. I don't get it. Tyrone Taylor pinch hits for Ben Gamel in a spot in the 4th inning where Pete Alonso and Mark Vientos had both drawn walks to get on. There was 2 outs in the inning. And here comes Gamel with a lefty on the mound. And so we got to bring Tyrone Taylor out of the dugout. He's got to pinch hit get him in the game right now. This is the opportunity, even though it's a bullpen game and Gamble got his first start in a Mets uniform, drew a walk in his first at bat. We didn't really get a chance to see him. Got to get Taylor in there. Why? Ben Gamble had an 860 OPS against left-handed pitching in AAA. Maybe the career numbers are far worse than that, but what he was doing in AAA, that's a lot better than a 474 OPS that Tyrone Taylor has against left-handed pitching this year. His splits are brutal. 742 OPS against right-handed pitching, 474 OPS against left-handed pitching. OPS is on base plus slugging. Getting on base at a 300 clip. That alone isn't even great. Slugging, and that's not his on-base percentage, mind you. I don't have those exact numbers. I'm sure it's split down the middle. It might be a 220 on base and a 220 slug, for all I know. The point is, to have a sub 500 OPS, that is abysmal. Abysmal. And even further, of his 13 extra base hits this year, 11 have come with a righty on the mound. All of his home runs have come with a righty on the mound. 20 of his 21 RBIs have come with a righty on the mound. And the reason why I'm so frustrated about this is I can see a world where Tyrone Taylor gets force-fed each of these 3 starts against a left-handed pitcher because he bats right-handed. Now, I'm not saying that Jeff McNeil or even Ben Gamble is significantly better against lefties than Tyrone Taylor. And Tyrone Taylor is a better glove than both of those guys. But I would take my chances on either McNeil or Gamble over Tyrone Taylor against a lefty right now. That's even with McNeil's struggles this year because he doesn't have a splits problem. McNeil just has a hitting problem this year. And I'm hoping that he can carry over some of the success from Friday night and find a hot streak. Didn't look good on Sunday, 0 for 5. But I'm still willing to ride Jeff McNeil's track record and put him in right field for this series and start both him and Iglesias for all 3 of these games, for all I care, instead of going to a guy that consistently sucks against lefties. And I apologize for being so hard on this one, but man, is it frustrating when they go to Taylor in that spot, first pitch, slider, pop up. An opportunity to get back in the game at that point. And yes, the Mets eventually did. But you know what happened when they did? 6th inning. They scored 2 runs. Mark Vientos staying on second base. Another RBI spot for Tyrone Taylor. Got a sinker. Could not have been more center cut. Literally right down the middle. Looks at it. So, and that was against a righty. But count against a lefty, you're ambushing first pitch after, mind you, the guy before you walked, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you're going first pitch slider, but you get a first pitch fastball and you don't swing at that one. And then sweeper, next pitch, also right down the middle, and he flew out. I think Tyrone Taylor starting against righties makes a lot of sense because he's hit them well this year, and he's a good defender in right. But they got to find a platoon partner for him, and that was part of the problem when they went to make their decision with their roster, is there wasn't an ideal platoon partner. And that's why I thought they went to Ben Gamble, because he was the one guy that was actually faring pretty decent against lefties. He was crushing righties, mind you. And who knows, maybe Ben Gamble is just a better player than Tyrone Taylor right now. I don't know. I would have liked to see him get 5 at-bats on Sunday to at least see what it looks like. And instead, we're so obsessed with the splits that, or not even, I keep saying that. We're not even obsessed with the splits. We're so obsessed with getting a righty in there versus a lefty because we think that that's going to result in something, even though all the data tells us it's not. All right. I digress on that. Probably way too much time to spend on it, but clearly it got me heated today. Let's talk about the pitching matchups. David Peterson versus Mackenzie Gore, Monday night here. Gore has been great this year. 3.60 ERA in 16 starts, 99 strikeouts and 85 innings pitched. I think he might be the Nationals all-star. It's either him or CJ Abrams or maybe Jake Irvin or Kyle Finnegan. They got a couple of options to be their lone representative. I think Gore has as good of a case as any of them, but then again, maybe Finnegan just gets it because he has a low ERA as a reliever. But Gore did face the Mets the last time these two teams met, and it didn't go well for him. He allowed 6 runs on 7 hits and 4 walks, left the game in the 5th inning with only 1 out recorded. Mark Vientos took him deep. So we'll see if the Mets can have similar success against him again. David Peterson had a very good start against the Nationals. Went 6 2/3, allowed 2 runs on 5 hits, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. We have seen an uptick in his strikeouts over his last 2 starts. That was going up against much better lineups than this one, the Rangers and then the Yankees. So we'll see. We'll see if David Peterson can strike out some more batters, get deep into this game. It'd be nice if he could give them some length like he did the last time he faced the Nationals. Now, meanwhile, you have Daniel Nunez, Reed Garrett, Jake Diekman, Ty Adcock, and Tyler J, who should all be fresh. So honestly, this bullpen is in pretty good shape. I don't love the late innings options outside of Nunez right now, but it sort of is what it is. Game 2, Sean Manaea versus DJ Hers. We watched Hers make his MLB debut last month against the Mets. They scored 4 runs off of him on 7 hits, 2 walks. Harrison Bader took him deep. If I remember that game correctly, I think it was the 5th inning where things went sideways for him and he got pulled. And they've had a short hook on him in all of his starts so far, really. He's made 5 starts with a 5.48 ERA. Not a guy you should be overly concerned with for that second game. Game 3, it'll be Mitchell Parker. We don't know who's starting for the Mets for the rest of the series. Parker is another rookie, has a 3.32 ERA and 14 starts this year. Control pitcher, doesn't walk many, doesn't strike out many either. We did not see him in that last series, so this will be our first look at seeing what Mitchell Parker looks like, and we'll see how the Mets bats fare against him. So again, 3 lefties, back to back to back, and then you have a righty in Jake Irvin, who has another all-star case, really, if you really wanted to look at it, because he's got a 3.03 ERA this year. Been very good. And another guy the Mets have not faced this season. The question is, who's going to pitch the final 2 games of this series for the Mets? Right now, they are not announcing it. We thought that Christian Scott might be making a start on Tuesday because Gary Cohen sort of maybe let the cat out of the bag on that during a broadcast, but the Mets have not announced it officially. Christian Scott did pitch last Tuesday, so that would be sort of on your minor league start once a week type line to have him go on Tuesday. It wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for the Mets to change their mind and say, oh, actually, we're going to bump Manaea to Wednesday. But maybe they like keeping those 2 guys in place for now and then making their roster decisions at a later date. If David Peterson gets knocked up in this first game of the series, he very well could be optioned. And then that would free you up to add another reliever or to call up Scott. There's a lot of things the Mets can do here. So we'll really see. I'd imagine we see Christian Scott in this series, but there's also a chance to see Jose Butto. Butto last pitched on Friday, so he could pitch on Wednesday. Jose Quintana pitched on Friday, so both of those guys could go on Wednesday. It'll be one of Scott, Butto, or Quintana, unless they start Christian Scott on Tuesday and bump Manaea to Wednesday. And then for Thursday, it just depends on when Quintana pitches. I'd imagine Quintana is going to get the start on Thursday, and they're going to slide somebody in between all those lefties, whether it's Butto or Scott. Severino won't pitch in this series. He's obviously going to need his 4 days rest if they're going on Sunday. He would open up the series in Pittsburgh. So we'll see what the Mets can do here. It's a team that they fared very well against last time. I don't look at this Nationals roster and understand how they've won as many games as they have this year, to be completely honest. But they have won a lot of games, and any team can beat you in Major League Baseball. This is put up or shut up time for the Mets. You got to win these games. If you want to be a buyer this year, if you want to have a season, it's do or die time. This is the stretch of your season where you can really make it all happen. And really, if you do your work in the next 2 weeks, the rest of the season, if you hang around 500, you might be fine, honestly, because if you got 5 games over 500 before the All-Star break, 5 games over 500, being an 85, 86 win team by the end of the year, whatever that ends up looking like, that probably is enough to make the playoffs. So this is the time for the New York Mets. We'll see if they take advantage. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The goal is to reach 9,000 subs by the All-Star break. We got 2 weeks to do it, and we're a little over 100 subs away from getting there. So I appreciate all of you who hit that subscribe button. If you want to follow me on social, you can do so at Finkelstein Ryan on X or at Locked On Mets to follow the show. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, which is streaming 24/7 on YouTube, covering all the latest in the world of sports. Locked On Sports Today is also streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.